I never imagined I'd end up as the target of mailbox theft, least of all carried out by the very president of our homeowners association. Yet that's precisely what happened when Karen Wilcox branded me the #1 troublemaker in the peaceful suburb of Oak Ridge Estates. The trouble began the moment I settled into the neighborhood 6 months earlier. Having just retired from a long career as a postal worker, I fully appreciated the value of rules and order. Karen, however, elevated rule enforcement into something far more extreme. She was in her mid-50s, instantly recognizable by her sharp, bobbed haircut and the way her lips seemed permanently pinched, growing even tighter whenever she detected the tiniest violation. My initial encounter with her came only 3 days after I moved in. The night before trash pickup, I had rolled my bin to the curb, apparently a grave offense under the HOA regulations, which permitted bins to be placed out only on the actual morning of collection. At exactly 9:00 p.m., Karen strode up my driveway armed with a flashlight, banged on my front door with such force that I thought an intruder was trying to force entry, and declared in her most patronizing tone, "Excuse me, but your trash container is in direct violation of Section 4, Paragraph 3 of the Community Guidelines. First offense earns a verbal warning. A second brings a written notice. The third results in a fine. I strongly recommend you remove that bin to your garage at once." I offered an apology and promptly complied, though I couldn't ignore how she stood there in the driveway, flashlight beam fixed on me until she was satisfied I had obeyed. That should have been my earliest clue about the kind of person I was dealing with. Over the following months, the citations arrived relentlessly for grass measuring a mere quarter-inch beyond regulation height, for a garden hose left visible from the road, for a small patch of slightly weathered paint on the back porch that could only be noticed if someone went looking for flaws. And Karen, of course, was always looking. "I'm simply performing my duty," she would reply with that same rigid smile whenever I attempted a reasonable conversation. "Someone must protect our property values. You ought to be grateful." The situation worsened when I decided to hang a modest bird feeder in my backyard. According to Karen, this constituted an unauthorized structure in violation of the bylaws. When I gently pointed out that the house directly across the street displayed 3 such feeders, she explained coolly that the owner had submitted the required application and obtained formal approval from the Architectural Review Committee, which she, naturally, also chaired. "You're being targeted," my next-door neighbor Tom cautioned one evening while we talked across the fence. "She does this to every newcomer until they either conform completely or pack up and leave. Last year, she tormented the Petersons so relentlessly that they sold their home at a significant loss just to get away from her control." Determined to address the obvious double standards, I chose to attend the next HOA meeting. That decision, I would later realize, was the beginning of my real trouble. The gathering took place in the modest community center next to the neighborhood swimming pool. Roughly 20 residents were present, most appearing either bored or quietly defeated, as Karen conducted the agenda with the precision of a military commander. When the time came for open comments, I raised my hand and spoke calmly, laying out the pattern of experiences I'd had. "It appears the rules are enforced selectively, depending on the homeowner," I said, keeping my voice even and professional. "All I'm requesting is fair and uniform application of the regulations for everyone." Karen's face flushed a deep, unnatural crimson. "Mr. Harrison," she replied through tightly clenched teeth, "perhaps you haven't grasped how things operate in this community. The board exercises discretionary authority over all enforcement decisions. If you have particular grievances, you may submit them in writing, and we will consider them when it suits our schedule." A few neighbors quietly nodded in support of my remarks, which only seemed to fuel her anger. As people began to leave, she intercepted me near the exit. "You've made a very serious error," she whispered, and all traces of civility vanished. "No one challenges me in my community. No one." I dismissed her words as empty bluster until the following week, when my monthly Social Security check never arrived. As a new retiree, that payment formed a critical piece of my budget. I contacted the Social Security Administration. They verified the check had been mailed on time. Days passed with no sign of it, and concern began to grow. Then, on the next Monday, while I was checking my mailbox, I spotted Karen hovering near the cluster of community mailboxes. She offered that familiar thin smile and asked sweetly, "Missing something important?" What a shame. With that, she turned and walked off, her expensive handbag swaying with each confident step. That was the moment real suspicion took root. I decided it was time to install a small security camera pointed directly at my mailbox. Nothing fancy, just my old smartphone tucked carefully inside a nearby bush, set to begin recording the moment it sensed any movement. It wasn't high-tech surveillance, but I hoped it would be enough to reveal what was really going on. 3 days later, my worst suspicions were proven true. When I reviewed the video, there was Karen, arriving at the mailboxes shortly after 11 o'clock a.m. She used a key to unlock the entire row of boxes, then calmly went through the contents of one after another. She pulled several envelopes from different compartments, including mine, before sliding them neatly into her purse and securing everything again. I sat there in disbelief. This had gone far beyond simple neighborhood bullying. This was outright theft of mail, a federal crime. Having spent decades working for the post office, I understood precisely how grave an offense this was. Still, I knew better than to confront someone as powerful as Karen without ironclad proof. Over the following 2 weeks, the camera captured her repeating the same routine 3 more times. On the 4th occasion, she found exactly what she must have been hoping for: my replacement social security check, which I'd requested after the first one mysteriously disappeared. The footage clearly showed her pausing to study the envelope, noticing the official government markings, then tucking it into her bag with a small, pleased smile. With this undeniable evidence, I reached out to the Postal Inspection Service. The next day, Postal Inspector Malcolm Jenkins came to my house. He was a serious, no-frills federal agent who watched the recordings with mounting alarm. "This is classic mail theft," he stated firmly. "And the fact that she's using what looks like a master key to access the entire bank of boxes elevates the severity considerably. Any idea how she might have gotten hold of that key?" I explained that, as HOA president, Karen almost certainly had legitimate access to keys for all shared community property, including the mailbox cluster. Jenkins gave a slow, grim nod, and then asked whether I would be willing to help set up a controlled operation to catch her red-handed. Considering how much my financial stability depended on those missing payments, I agreed without hesitation. The strategy was straightforward, but clever. The Postal Service would send me a specially prepared piece of mail and envelope designed to look like an official government check, but containing only a small tracking device. Inspector Jenkins and his team would keep close watch and move in the instant Karen took the bait. 2 days later, everything was in place. I made a point of acting as though I were leaving for the day, backing my car loudly out of the driveway, waving to a neighbor, then driving off. In reality, I parked just around the corner and returned on foot to join Inspector Jenkins, who waited inside an unmarked van positioned near the community center. We didn't have to wait long. At exactly 11:15 a.m., Karen's familiar silver SUV rolled up to the mailboxes. Through binoculars, we observed her execute the same practiced steps, unlocking the full bank of boxes with her master key and sorting through the mail inside. When she opened my box and saw what appeared to be another government check, her expression brightened noticeably. The second she slipped the envelope into her purse, Inspector Jenkins issued the command. 2 postal inspection vehicles swiftly moved in, boxing in her SUV from both sides. The stunned look that crossed Karen's face as agents approached with badges raised was one I will never forget. "Karen Wilcox," Inspector Jenkins announced in a clear voice that carried to the neighbors now gathering outside. "I'm Postal Inspector Malcolm Jenkins. You are under arrest for mail theft, a federal offense. We have video evidence documenting multiple instances of you removing mail from these community boxes, including government checks belonging to other residents." Karen's face shifted rapidly: shock, indignation, then unmistakable fear as the weight of the situation settled over her. "This is absurd," she protested. "I'm the president of the Homeowners Association. I was merely inspecting the mail area for possible community guideline violations, "Ma'am," Inspector Jenkins interrupted evenly. "You have the right to remain silent." He continued reciting her Miranda rights while another agent placed handcuffs on her wrists. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." By now, a small crowd had formed, including several HOA board members. Karen's gaze darted desperately among them, searching for support, but she found only stunned and repulsed expressions. On the spot, agents searched her purse. Inside, they discovered not just the decor envelope, but a collection of other residents' mail, credit card statements, utility bills, even a birthday card that still contained its gift card. Federal mail theft carries a maximum penalty of 5 years in federal prison and fines up to $250,000 per offense. Inspector Jenkins informed her as she was escorted toward the waiting vehicle. "We have documented at least 7 distinct incidents." At last, Karen's carefully polished exterior collapsed entirely. "You can't do this to me," she cried, straining against the restraints. "Do you have any idea who I am in this neighborhood? I run this place." "Not anymore," Walter Green, the HOA vice president, called out from the growing group of onlookers who had watched the entire arrest unfold. "You're removed from the board, effective immediately," as Karen was placed into the back of the inspection service vehicle. Tears streaking black mascara down her face, she shot me one final, venomous glare. "This is all your fault," she spat. "You'll regret this." But as I watched that vehicle pull away with Karen in custody, all I felt was an overwhelming sense of relief. The preliminary hearing the following week. Karen sat rigidly in the courtroom as the judge denied bail, citing both the gravity of the federal mail theft charges and the clear evidence of repeated, deliberate targeting of fellow residents. When the prosecutor outlined the multiple felony counts, she now faced carrying a minimum of 3 years in federal prison and fines exceeding $100,000. Karen's composure finally shattered. She broke down into uncontrollable sobs, crying out that someone of her standing in the community could never endure prison. From the gallery, her former HOA board colleagues watched in silence, their expressions ranging from stunned disbelief to thinly veiled satisfaction.